for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine. Does listening to music affect our impression of wine? Some professional tasters argue that only silence will do. Susan Lin is the ideal person to give us some answers, as she's both a professional pianist and someone who wrote her Master of Wine research paper on classical music and the sensory perception of non-vintage champagne. Our chat provided a deep dive into the world of cross-modal correspondences and so much else besides. Hello, Susan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Tim. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
It is. It's nice sunny day in London. You're in the Bay Area, aren't you? Lucky person.
Yes, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and today's a nice sunny day. It's going to be quite warm, I believe.
We're going to talk a lot about wine, but also about music, because you're somebody who combines these two incredible passions, and you're very good at both of them, obviously. I mean, I'm pretty good at wine, but I'm not that good at music, at least not professionally. But I want to ask a little bit about you to start with. Just, where you were born and brought up. Were you brought up in the Bay Area?
Yes, I was. I was actually born in the Bay Area in California, and I've gone through schooling here. And it wasn't until I graduated from university and I started working in the high-tech industry that I actually moved to and spent time working in East Asia. So it was actually really interesting for me because my parents.
Both of your parents are from that part of the world, aren't they?
Yes. My father's from Taipei, Taiwan, and my mother was born in Shanghai, China. And the funny thing is they both actually went to school and lived in Taipei at the same time, but they never met. And Taipei is a very, very small place. They actually met in Dallas, Texas, many years later when my dad went for was there for his PhD and my mother was there for her bachelor's. So it's quite an interesting story.
And I mean, they're very bright, obviously, both of them. Musical as well. I mean, did they kind of push you into piano as a young kid?
You know what? It's like when you have parents who model for you, you don't need to be pushed. My parents actually met over their mutual love of classical music. So they were at a co-ed picnic. So my mother was going to a school that was all women's at the time. It's not anymore, but there was a co-ed picnic, and my mother's roommate convinced her not to wear her glasses because she said no guys were going to look at her if she was wearing her glasses, which I don't agree. But anyway, she did it, and she couldn't see anything, but she followed the music that she heard. My dad, being like the cool guy that he was, brought a boom box and he was playing music, but it was classical music, and it called to her and she just showed up and he was like, wow, she's really pretty. And he asked her out and she said yes. And then later she's like, what does he even look like?
So that's how they met. I love that. Yeah.
And he would take her to the cinema to see, those recasts of operas and ballets and symphony orchestras performances. So,
and what about food and wine in your upbringing? Were your parents wine drinkers, or were they foodies presumably as well, or not?
Actually, no. The funny thing is they weren't, but my maternal grandfather absolutely was. So he was the one. And you tasted wine with him a bit, didn't you? Yes. So when I was very, very young, when my grandparents were still living in the United States, we would, all of us, cousins and aunties and uncles, we would all go over to their house for dinner, every so often. And it was such a wonderful experience because we would all be there. We would all get together. And my grandfather was a consummate host, and he loved the concept of hospitality. And that's where I learned it from.
So how old were you when you had that first, could we say how old were you when you had a glass of wine?
Oh my God, I think I was definitely under 5. I was probably 3 because
oh my God.
No, I mean, the thing is that like I was so, I mean, every time the children would eat and then they would say, okay, go and watch TV or something or play. And then the adults would have their time. And that's when they brought out, that's when my grandfather would bring out the wine and everything. But I thought it was so fascinating. There was something really special that happened at this time, and something changed in the group. There was something magical that happened, and I wanted to know what was going on. So I would beg him to tell me about what he was doing, what he was pouring, because I was fascinated by the labels and the way everything looked. He would have bottles from Napa, from Bordeaux specifically, and also some Washingtonian Merlots. It was so fascinating when he had brandies and cognacs and things. And I just always wanted to know what was happening. And he, to his credit, treated me like an adult, even when I was a little kid, and told me what he knew, and showed me that a really good beverage can really bring people together, along with generosity and kindness. That was really special for me.
I mean, your first degree was in mass communications and computer science. You got you a job at Google for a while after that. But and then, I get the sense that what you really wanted to do was this master's. You did a master's in classical piano. You're a very distinguished pianist, and musicology. You also play the trumpet. You're an accomplished dancer. You sing. Strike me as a very high achiever.
Well, so are you, sir. I mean, anybody who's gone through the Master of Wine program for sure is probably going to be somebody who loves to learn, loves to challenge himself or herself, and just really have a curiosity for all the things in the world and everything that's progressing and changing, no matter what. So I thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. But it's more like those are things that I just couldn't not do. I had to try. And it certainly nothing came easily per se for a lot of things, especially dance too. Like my body isn't really well suited to classical ballet. I'm not very well turned out, and my feet aren't very beautifully arched. But I have strength and I have dedication, and so there are certain things that you can do. Even if you don't look like a classical, a willowy ballerina, you can still enjoy dance and do many other things. And that's how I went into a lot of Chinese ethnic dancing and classical dancing as well, which really, really opened my eyes to a lot of the culture that is in my family and beyond that too. So it was
that you hadn't experienced as a kid, really. Well, you not lived there, had you? I mean, you experienced it through your parents. Really. Exactly.
And honestly, I was brought up more with kind of a Western classical music culture and classical ballet type of culture. So every New Year's we would sit together in front of the television and watch the PBS broadcast of the Vienna New Year's concert, which we still do. It's such a great tradition. But these are the things that I grew up with, and I dreamed of waltzing away to Johann Strauss Jr. and Lehar and, playing in concert halls in Europe and things like that. So,
I mean, you had this job at Google. I think we want to talk more about the wine side of your life. But when did wine start to play an important role in your life? Was it while you were at Google that you started to get interested in wine? And, how was music fitting into it at that point? Had you already started playing music professionally? I think you said your first paying gig was as a musician, wasn't it?
Yes. I was in middle school. So maybe I was just barely 13 or 14, something like that. And I was amazed that I could do something I love to get paid for it. So, I would go around literally. I started at department stores that had pianos in the summer and be like, do you need a pianist? And then that's kind of stretched out into hotels, like hotel lobbies, when they would have tea or, what have you, and then restaurants. So I started playing for that. And I would see this ritual of wine being served, wine and beverages being served, and people, connecting over that. Yeah. And there's that part of that theater and that part of that social, ritual that really made an impression upon me even more during that time. So,
and when did you start doing the WSET exams, Wine and Spirit Education Trust exams, which are kind of, the base camp for the Master of Wine? If the Master of Wine is Everest, then you begin with base camp.
Yes, this was much later. So this was when I was working in high tech, and I had always just been interested in what my grandfather had taught me and what I had seen later. I just always wanted to study it, and I just did it on my own, just for fun in my spare time. But then I thought, I really want to learn more about this in a more concrete way. So I really want an academic framework for this. And after doing some research, it seemed like the WSET program was best suited to me. So without really knowing that much more, because I didn't really know people in the industry, I signed up. So, and that's where it started. And then it's like, I just want to keep going. The more I learn, the more I want to learn. And the more I understand that I don't know about, and I would love to learn more about. So it's just never ending in the most wonderful way. learning process.
And did the fact that you spoke languages help? I mean, you've lost count of the number of languages you speak. You're French, Japanese, Mandarin, Spanish, and obviously English, which is your native language. But I just wondered, do you think languages are a musical gift? I tend to think they are a little bit, that you hear sounds and you repeat them, don't you? We're mimics in a way.
Yes, perhaps so. And I think, since the beginning, since learning ballet and learning ballet, all the terms are French, right? And then when you learn music, they're all Italian until, you start learning more, and you see the markings that Beethoven really started asserting, German, and even Mozart actually with the magic flute in the opera, like people were scandalized, Italian opera was the thing, like, you are going to write an opera in German. How could you, but he did. And thank goodness he did. Yeah. So learning that. And then of course, French, because many of my favorite composers are French or ended up in France, like Frédéric Chopin. So language is sort of, learning other languages is sort of part and parcel, even learning the training in those disciplines, musical and dance. Right. So, but one of the interesting things to your point is Mandarin Chinese is as a tonal language, right? I mean, Cantonese is as well, of course, but studies have shown that, even if people don't really have perfect pitch, like I actually don't have perfect pitch, I have a good relative pitch, but when we actually say things in Chinese, we tend to use the same tones over and over again. The hertz is very close. It's almost like no variation. So we kind of like naturally go back to the same tone when you say certain things. And so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Maybe I'm sure there's some connection somewhere, but I haven't done the research.
Yeah, I think so. But it's funny talking about Chopin. There's a place very near Berry Brothers in London, where, I don't know if you walked past that, where it was the place where Chopin stayed the last night. It was the night before he gave his last ever concert, which was at the Guildhall. And I think he was supposed to go and give a concert in Scotland, but never went. I think he was probably too ill or something. But, there's that plaque on the wall. And every time I walk past it, I go, oh, Chopin stayed there.
Wait, no, I missed this entirely. I must have walked by too quickly. This is terrible. I need to go back.
Okay, next
That's
time
wonderful.
I see you,
Thank you.
When I catch up with you, we're going to go there. What was your first job in wine? Because you lived in California. Did you ever consider going into the production side of it?
I did, and I actually, my first job, and I still work in retail, but at the same time, I have done some work doing harvest and debudding and all sorts of fun things like that. And also doing manual bottling and corking, which was a very interesting experience using very, very primitive equipment. But it was, it's very physical, and do you bond with everybody that you work with. And it's really incredible. But, I haven't gone into that, professionally. I love helping people out whenever I can. And I've done some work. I did a little bit in Burgundy as well. That was the debudding that happened, and here these beautiful tiny vines in Von Romanet. And I think I've never had that much back pain in my life after doing that.
I did a harvest for a couple of days at Comte Lafont years ago. It would have been about 1986 or something. And they put me on the picking team, and you notice how fast people who do it for a living pick. My back, I don't think my back's ever recovered, actually.
Oh, gosh.
2 days of that.
Take care.
And so what do you do now? I mean, you're head of wine expertise at Belmont Wine Exchange, which is a retailer. What does the job entail? I mean, you're not selling wine, are you? You're more kind of enthusing people about it?
I think it's both. They come they come hand in hand, because it's a very small company. There's only 6 of us, and I do a lot of the liaising with customers and also our partners, like negociants and distributors, and just partners and other resellers, right? So we have customers from individual collectors to restaurants and other resellers. So it really does run the gamut, and we have no rules about minimum quantities or what have you. So it's very flexible, and we don't really advertise. It's all about providing a really customized experience.
That's good.
And
I like the sound of it.
If people recommend us and they trust us, that's wonderful. And so for me, sometimes people just call, they want to have their wine therapy talk or whatever it is, and maybe they'll buy at another point, but it's like they like talking about it. And a lot of great jobs have sprouted from here as well, because people say like, okay, well, I'd like to do a dinner with a group of 10 friends, and can you help us curate the wines and then present the wines, etc. Oh, and by the way, we have this piano in the house that never gets played, and
All right.
Yeah, so it's fantastic. It just for me, a piano that is never played, it's like a fate worse than death for a great piano. So
sad.
I'm always really happy to play a piano, especially if it has been played.
Yeah, well, musicians always say they can tell if something's not being played, not because it's out of tune, but it feels sort of unloved. Is that true?
Yeah, you really can. Especially there's just something. There's just something about there's this energy or some kind of spirit. I know it sounds strange, but you can kind of tell when it's just hasn't. There isn't that sort of energy of others having been at it and it being touched in that way. Yeah. And it hasn't there you don't feel that sense of resonance that has been there recently.
I mean, so you started doing the WCT exams. What made you want to do the Master of Wine? I mean, you just because you like a challenge?
I just wanted to keep going. I wanted to keep learning. And I knew that it would just be that the expectations, the gap in expectations for what is required of one to embarking on the Master of Wine program, it was just, logarithmic, right? Yeah. And so, but you never know until you actually try it. And I just wanted to try it because I knew I wanted to keep learning. And I told myself, when I was preparing for the stage 2 exam, hey, if I don't make it through this, it's okay because there's many past success and, I'm not going to stop learning no matter what. I'm not going to keep trying. And then I told myself, I've met so many wonderful people through this program and that's worth more than anything. And, we just got to keep going. But somehow I made it through. So, and then, of course, the research paper was probably my favorite part.
Well, that's the bit I want to talk about because it's amazing. It was called the dissertation when I did it. It was so long ago. But most RPs, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, are pretty boring. I look at the titles and I think, oh, God. I mean, mine was a bit more interesting those days. It seems to become very academic. But how did you get yours past the gatekeepers? Because it's really interesting. The title was The Influence of Classical Music on the Sensory Perception of Brut Non-Vintage Champagne. Now, I love this idea. How did you get it past them? I mean, did you bribe somebody or what?
Oh, heavens, no. Actually, to your point, I was actually quite worried that it would not be accepted because, conceptually, most people, dismiss it out of hand saying like, oh, it's, how could that be academic? And how could you actually, put any data to that? How can you quantify any of these things that seem so woo woo, that sort of thing? And, to their credit, I don't blame them. There's a lot out there that, is not based in anything, scientific or academic or research based, which is okay. I mean, I think anytime people talk about, putting music and wine together, it's a win and however they do it. But for me, coming from a world of data, like working at Google for years and such, I really wanted to look into this. And so the reason I was able to get it through is because certainly I'm not the first person who's ever looked into anything similar. And so thank goodness, and over the last, 10, 15 years, there's been a growing body of research for people looking into what they're calling cross-modal correspondences, which is the study of the intuitive associations that humans make between stimuli that would otherwise be considered quite distinct from one another. In this case, auditory and taste sense, right? So there's a lot of research, and of course, most people have heard of the Oxford professor Charles Spence, who wrote the book. I think. Oh my God! Now I can't remember. It's not gastrophysics, but everybody knows what it is.
Something like
that.
Yes,
yeah. And so he's the effect of priming. For me, I actually, as part of mass communications, I studied a lot of sociology and psychology, and so for me, the concept of priming and narrative that can influence the subsequent experience we have sensorially with whatever we do next is very, very fascinating to me. And so I think this was very, very, it really dovetailed with everything that I wanted to explore. And so armed with all this literature review and the 100+ studies that I had read, I think I was able to make a solid case. After
and they went, all right.
Yes.
Just tell us a bit about the methodology, because you used 4 pieces of music, didn't you? And silence as the fifth, as the kind of, what would you call that? As a
control,
Yeah, as a control, exactly. Control sample. Were they bits of music that you were particularly fond of, or were they designed to do a job and to be very different one from another?
They were designed for a job. Yes, absolutely. So I worked with a couple of my past professors from my master's in music to vet the pieces too, because I made a short list of basically, music is comprised of different elements, right? We can call them musical parameters, say. So one of them is like pitch, right? How high or low does it sound? And then timbre is the quality of the instruments, or the combination of instruments, round and smooth, or is it bright and sharp, right? And then, there's other elements too as well. So, like you look at articulation, is it long, smooth phrases, or is it jumpy and, dynamic and exciting, percussive perhaps even, right? So there's those different elements in music that create the piece. And so if you look at like a graph, and then you split it into 4 quadrants, right? So I wanted to make sure that there was a piece that represented the combinations for each of those quadrants. So
interesting.
Yeah. So each of those pieces were chosen for those reasons, as their makeup.
What were the 4 pieces? Can you remember? You probably got sick of hearing them, did you, or not?
Actually, I didn't, in a way, because they're such great pieces. But they were, music character was actually part of this too, because there have been studies about character mapping, and then what people perceive as character, what they're tasting. So there was calm versus, let's see, there was powerful, gentle, and then calm, exciting, right? So those 2 spectrums. So the pieces were also chosen for those combinations as well. So there was a piece by Claude Debussy, the French Impressionist composer, that was called Danse sacrée et profane. And I did the Danse sacrée. It's very, very beautiful. Actually, no, I did the profane. Sorry. It's for harp and strings. And it's very quiet. It's very peaceful. It's gentle. It's calm, and it's smooth lines. And it's very beautiful. Slow tempo. Yeah, tempo is one of the most important things too in those elements. And then another one was the complete opposite, which was very very bright, very light. It was by Camille Saint-Saëns, also French. It was from the Carnival of the Animals, the finale. So it's very bright and bouncy and very fun and exciting. And I don't know, have you ever watched Walt Disney's Fantasia 2000 with the cartoons? No. With the they match cartoons. They match cartoons with the music, which is really, really wonderful. But this was the one with a group of flamingos that is having a hard time with one flamingo in the flock who plays with a yo-yo, and they used this music for it, and it was absolutely fabulous. So that was the other one. And then there was Pictures at an Exhibition, The Promenade by Mussorgsky, so Russian composer. And this is brass and strings, very, very just broad, round timbre, long phrases, slow, very stately, very majestic, right? And then slow tempo. And then the other one, the last one, was the 3rd movement of Brahms' Violin Concerto, which is powerful, but it's exciting. And it's also got high pitched, fast tempo, passionate, really, really just like, it's just, if anyone has the chance to listen to recording, Itzhak Perlman and Hilary Hahn are 2 of my favorites, although many of them will be wonderful. So those are the 4 pieces, and they covered as much as I could. For this experiment.
The findings were fascinating to me and other people, because you got quite a bit of coverage in the press as well. I often listen to music when I taste wine, even when I'm writing tasting notes. And we have a playlist, my playlist at the International Wine Challenge. I must share it with you. But a lot of professional tasters, masters of wine included, think that you need to assess wines in monastic silence. And just tell us what your research showed, because silence did really badly, didn't it? People liked the wine less in silence.
This really, really surprised me. I did not expect this, because it's true. Even during, the discussions and the talkbacks we had after every single session that I had, we had multiple sessions with 9 to 11 participants each, and the music and the silence order was randomized across each one, so it was never the same. And people would say, those who were what we call the wine experts, people in industry, people who are master's wine students, master somms, like, no, don't want music at all. I mean, we've trained so hard to be academic and clinical in our tasting. We don't want anything to distract us. And I took the data and I did the statistical analysis on the wine preference, because I had from 1 to 9 on the different wine sensory characteristics like fruitiness, richness, complexity, freshness, like acidity, right? Things like that. But then I also had how much did you enjoy the wine on a scale from 1 to 9 for each piece. And then I had analogous ratings for the music, right? How much did you like the music also? And how they would rate the characteristics of the music as well, so that I can map those as much as possible and see whether there was any relation or none. And I ran the numbers, and I had that sort of, in the Warner Brothers cartoons where like somebody goes blink, blink, and there's like this little boop, boop sound. Like, I was really, really blown away. Everybody across the board, statistically speaking, was just the wine was tasted without music performed the least.
The least well.
All the sensory characteristics were rated lower. I mean, it was the most acidic. It wasn't, fresh. It was kind of bitter and out of balance, the least effervescent for a sparkling wine, and the least complex, the least
I was going to say, what we should add, that what they didn't know, but you obviously did know, was they were tasting the same wine 5 times.
That's right.
Which was Pico yellow label. And they all thought, I think you said with one exception, that they were tasting different wines. Right. I mean,
that was the other thing that was just really moved me so much. And that people were really, really keen about talking about how different these wines were based on like each piece that was played. And then you're like, oh, you paired this perfectly with this piece because they were all the same wine, in 5 different glasses. And, I redid the numbers. I actually did a statistical analysis on only the wine expert demographic and then the recreational drinkers, so to speak. And I was lucky that it was almost roughly 50% of each demographic. And it was absolutely clear among even the wine experts that the wines tasted with music performed so much better. They were much more enjoyed and showed much more better sensory characteristics than the one tasted without music. So
it's interesting, isn't it? And because you chose classical music. I mean, you could have done something differently where one would have been a piece of heavy metal or something like that. Or, I mean, I wonder, what sort of reaction would you have if I played you a piece of music you didn't like? I know you don't like country music in particular. I don't particularly like rap. I just wonder if somebody was playing rap while I was drinking my favourite wine, would that detract from my enjoyment of wine? In other words, would I have a different reaction, an adverse reaction to the wine because the music is irritating me or irritating you?
Right. So again, the priming aspect is going to have an influence on it. If you already are primed saying like, oh, I don't like this, it might have an effect, right? But to your point, I actually, all types of music I'm willing to listen to and I'm willing to see the merits in. So in terms of country music, there's different styles within that as well. And just to test myself, and then I've done other projects, since this research, taking music from different genres, but also selecting them for the different musical parameter combinations, given the research results. And it seems to have very similar results. So it really seems to be agnostic of genre. And it was really interesting that for my experiment, there were people who actually said at the end, I really don't like classical music. I kind of hate classical music out of hand. I really like hip hop. But I thought you paired the music with each of these wines so well. It was so enjoyable.
They thought there were 4 different wines and you chose the music.
5 different wines. Yeah, absolutely. It was mind blowing to me. And I appreciated that comment so much. And again, there were people who said, oh, they recognize many people know the Mussorgsky Pictures and Exhibition promenade piece. And some people were like, I rated the piece low. Like, I don't like this piece. But the wine still performed much better with that piece than without music.
So we can say, well, according to your research, and I think this is probably true, that wine tastes better with music, right? If you've got music playing, it's going to enhance the pleasure you're getting from the wine, and vice versa, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the trends seem to point to that, and of course, in research results, you can never say anything with absolute, 100% authority, and it always requires, more research. But it's, based on the research results that I had, they did corroborate a lot of previous research and bring some new aspects that can be further tested, even more rigorously in other capacities. So, but I really wanted to work with champagne and sparkling wine because I hadn't seen any studies that had focused specifically on sparkling wines, and having the element of carbon dioxide will really, really, for me, I was like, this should really have an influence on something. This is a characteristic that is very powerful. There's a reason why sparkling wines are so special, right? And so I wanted to see, what kinds of influences music may or may not have on it. And so it was really fascinating what the results came up with. But then there was the things that had nothing to do with sparkling wine at all, which was the music versus no music. And just the fact that the music being there influenced people so much in terms of these are different wines, So
that's the most fascinating thing, isn't it, really? We've talked a little bit about language and the language we use to talk about wine and music, and you're very articulate when you're talking about both. But are there similarities between the words we use to describe wine and the words that you, as a musician, use to describe music?
I think not only me, but I think many people use similar words when they describe wines and music. And often, when I want to open up a session to help people explore, the interaction of music and wine or the experience of music and wine, I'll just have people listen to some music and have them describe it. And often they'll say like, oh, it's sometimes they'll use words like, oh, it's complex. It's emotional. It's rich, or it's sparkling. It's, they use even words like that. And then it's like, okay, well, how might you describe a crisp Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand? Or how might you describe a Bordeaux blend from the left bank, something like that. And many of the words end up being quite similar. It's very striking. So
they're also things that are quite difficult to describe in a sense, aren't they? I mean, I think it was Elvis Costello once said that writing about music was like dancing about architecture or something like that. I can't remember the exact term.
Yes.
They're kind of ineffable in a sense that you can't really get to the heart of what you're talking, unless you do it through similes and metaphors and things like that. It's very hard to actually describe what you're hearing and what you're tasting. And is that a link between the two again?
Yes, I think, how do you describe? I'm actually preparing with fellow MW Sherry Morano for an upcoming seminar on descriptive tasting, but through the lens of different sensory experiences. So we're actually exploring that connection, and I think it is very, very valuable in terms of tapping into our own senses, each as unique individuals, because we all have different ways of seeing the world and experiencing the world, and to making connections. And so, I encourage people to really lean into, what comes naturally for them. For me, I inevitably link a lot of the study of wine to my experiences studying music and dance, because it does take a lot of discipline. It's similar discipline, and the way that we learn, but also the connections that we make with our mind and also with our bodies, right? Because each of those things, you could say that dance is perhaps a little bit more physical than tasting wine, but at the same time, tasting wine is extremely physical, because you're taking in something, and you're tasting, you're actually viscerally, physiologically, and then psychologically also, and sometimes emotionally
engaging with it,
tasting it. Yeah. And so those kinds of connections can be very, really powerful and help us create our sense memory.
It's interesting. I mean, did any of the wine companies, champagne companies, for instance, pick up on your research and say, that's interesting, maybe we should use music more to promote our wines, have wines with a kind of audio logo or something like that?
Yes, I've been working with a lot of people on that. And in fact, I have worked with a couple of champagne companies on doing preliminary research for this sort of thing. And I really hope that there will be more inroads for this, because I know that in times where, there's a limited budget, people are going to be focusing on different things. But at the same time, I think, differentiating oneself in a crowded market also is extremely important. And I think leaving a strong impression on people is important. And the auditory experience is sometimes even perhaps more powerful in a lot of ways, because we're less aware of it. For those of us who are sighted, the research shows that 70% or more of what we immediately know that we take in is visual. And so perhaps it's even more powerful what we hear because we're not as aware that we're actually hearing it, that it's coming in. And so, when people talk about, subliminal messaging or whatever, perhaps the audio side is a little bit more powerful.
Well, I think so, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about people who play music to their vines or wines also in tank and barrel? I mean, that I know Montes do this at Kaiken.
Yes.
My friend Tewa Sonoro do it. De Morgan's on do it in South Africa. Does it work? Or not? I mean, any research on it?
Yeah, Chateau Palmera likes to play jazz too for their wines in Margaux. So I think it's wonderful. First of all, for me, it's like I feel like if it makes you feel better about it, great.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't actually ask the vines per se, but we can see what happens. I mean, we could do studies, and so for me, it's like music is vibrations and energy, right? And you could mathematically break it down to waveforms, right? And so for me, actually, I would like to work with a winemaker with wines in barrel and just run frequencies, not music per se. So there's no confounding elements of like different types of music or character. It's just hertz. Right, different levels of frequencies, and to see, to run controls and run to see if there was there was any perceptible difference in what happens after the maturation period. So,
well, there's a producer, a very good producer in Chile called Tewa Sonoro, and he's a musician, and so he has different bits of music that he writes for different wines, and he plays that piece of music to that wine, as it were, and it's the same wine. A bit like your experiment with different pieces of music played, and they taste very different. So.
I love it. No, I think really, I mean, there's a lot of research that's been going on with it, but for me, I feel like there is an energy. It's sort of like when I was saying earlier, how you can kind of tell that if a piano has been played recently or not.
Yeah.
It's not something I can explain. And, there are a lot of things that research is not going to be able to explain, which I am not sad about because that's what keeps life fascinating and wonderful, and mysterious and most of all, deeply feeling, right? I think for me, regardless of any research, do it if you feel like it would make a difference because it's part of your expression. And it's, if you want to, have the vines or the barrels, experience that. And, but honestly, scientifically speaking, it is energy. It is energy that's being transmitted. And if you look at like all the biocorrosorial, like, the fungi are doing all the things so that they're going to feel that. So who knows what kind of influence it might have? I mean, it's entirely possible. I'd love to see more research on this and or participate in that. But I have to say that when I was growing up, I planted tulip bulbs in my parents' backyard, which was the most infertile, inhospitable plot of land you could ever imagine. I mean, I dug 6 inches painstakingly and found concrete. It was terrible. But they actually took root and they grew, and I played music for it. So this is me at 6 years old or something. I played music for it every day, just wanting it to grow. And
it did.
And it did. Maybe it would grow without the music, but it made me feel better about it. And I loved it. Yeah.
There's a piece on your website I like very much about, and it relates to what we're discussing right now, about the romance of wine. And in it, you said that romance is a phenomenon that cannot be explained by science. So, I mean, they're not antithetical, these two things, but they're very different, aren't they? And I think there is a place for romance, obviously, in life, but certainly in wine. I mean, a huge bit of wine is romance. I mean, arts, if you want to call it that, and not science. I mean, is that what you were trying to say in the piece?
Thank you so much, first of all, for reading it. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and because these are things I think about a lot because, I'm always thinking like, I have the sort of side of me that is very flight of fancy, very whimsical, very passionate, that always wants to be able to express everything that I can from, in my heart through a composition or through, any sort of piece. But at the same time, it takes a lot of technicality and technical work for it to happen. And it's sort of like the music that, Johannes Brahms wrote. It's so perfectly architected. And yet when you listen to it, it is the most deeply emotional music like you could ever hear. And it just blows my mind every time. I listen to music like that, or I play music like that. And it's, I feel like I need to express it the most, but it's so mathematical at the same time. And so, yes, it's like there is a science and art, and there's always those things twined together. But in the end, like I think, the end product, the end experience is something we'll never be able to explain with science saying like, okay, well, you've got a certain sort of neurons firing off, and there's certain chemicals being distributed in the brain, and that's why you're feeling this, And I think, sure, if you want to go into that, that's fine. But we are sensory beings, and we experience things holistically. Right. And I think we should all remember as humans how to feel and how to allow ourselves to feel those things. And I think science is wonderful. It's incredibly important. We must continue to pursue data in that realm, but let us take care to not let that overshadow the experiences we actually have in our lives that make us human.
Yeah, I find this a little bit, talking about terroir with geologists, that they say wines can't taste of the soil. There's no influence whatsoever. And I said, but they taste completely different. If you taste wine every day of your life, a wine that's grown on granite tastes very different from wine grown on clay, tastes different from wine grown on limestone. And they say, well, you can't explain it scientifically. And I feel like saying, well, I'm not sure I care. Really, because it's there. Doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean I don't perceive it. I don't know. Is that part of what you're trying to say as well, that sometimes science doesn't have all the answers, really?
Yes. And I think that's why, science is important. People have to keep pushing. People have to keep asking. And it's okay if we don't have all the answers, I think. And I think for those of us who want to live a fulfilled life, let's long live the mystery. I think it's super important for us to embrace that, and also to revel in the wonder that we feel when there's something that just takes our breath away. Yeah.
I love that. I think long live the mystery. I agree with that very much. I just wrote a tasting note tonight for a wine I've given 100 points to, and I more or less said that. I said, I tried to express what it meant to me in emotional terms. How do you get away from wine? I mean, there's a grand piano sitting behind you. I know that music is relaxation for you, and also, a little bit of what you do to earn a living. Anything else? Do you still dance? You see occasionally pictures of you on your Instagram profile with you in a pose dancing somewhere.
The dancer never leaves. The dancer is always a part of me.
Leaves.
Yeah. I don't dance like I used to, but I still exercise every day, and I stretch because it feels very strange not to. I feel like it's just sort of like how every day, you want to say, I like to say hello to my piano, even if I'm tired. It's like, I don't feel like I need to practice, like say hello to the piano. And once you start, that's it. But it feels weird not to say hello to my muscles too.
Okay, so muscles. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Alvaro Palacios once played his guitar for us. Can you give us a little quick minute on the piano? Will the piano be loud enough to pick it up on the microphone? It should be.
Well,
can you play us out?
Let's see. Let's see if I can. Let me see if I can move the headphones here so I don't pull the laptop and everything comes crashing down. Hang on.
All right.
I wonder if I can. Maybe I'll put this here. Let's see.
Okay, we're going to get a little bit of piano at the end.
All right.
Quick minute of piano to see us out.
All right, it's a little awkward here. Let me see if I can. Okay.
Yes, fantastic.
How was that?
That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you for playing us out. Thank you for sharing your incredible knowledge and passion for both music and wine. It's been fascinating talking to you. See you soon to look at that Chopin plaque on the wall.
Yes. Thank you very much, Tim. Such a wonderful conversation.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Well, I'm delighted to hear that music appears to make wine taste better. And I love Susan's idea that mystery and a little romance are central to how she perceives the world. My next podcast in 2 weeks' time, as Cork Talk is taking a summer break, will be with Adriana Ochoa of Bodegas Ochoa in Navarra. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @TimAtkin and on Instagram @TimAtkinMW. See you next week.